Inside the luxurious first-class lounge at JFK International, a group of fashionable passengers shared a laugh at one man's expense. Their target, a quiet black man and his battered, scuffed-up suitcase. They judged him, dismissed him, and broadcasted their contempt online, never imagining their target was the secret billionaire who controlled the very industry they worshipped. This isn't just a story about a mistake. It's about a single moment of arrogance that triggered a devastating real-world chain reaction of karma, ruining lives, fortunes, and exposing the ugly truth behind the world of luxury. Stay with me, because you are about to witness how a quiet, obscure act of mockery led to a spectacularly loud and public downfall. The first-class lounge at JFK's Terminal 4 was less a waiting area and more a carefully curated ecosystem of superiority. It was a hushed cathedral of polished chrome, free-flowing champagne, and the soft, self-satisfied murmur of people who believed their boarding pass was a patent of nobility. The air, conditioned to a perfect 21 degrees Celsius, smelled of expensive perfume and entitlement. Through the vast floor-to-ceiling windows, jumbo jets lumbered to and from their gates like metallic beasts of burden. But inside the world was serene, ordered and insulated from the frantic energy of the main terminal. Into this sanctuary walked Dr. Samuel Adebayo. To the casual observer, he was an anomaly, a glitch in the lounge's meticulously crafted matrix. He was a tall, lean black man, in his late 40s, with a face that held the quiet wisdom of a scholar and the weary lines of a relentless traveler. He wasn't dressed for first class, not in the way the lounge's unspoken dress code demanded. No Zegna suit, no Patek Philippe watch peeking from a starched cuff. Instead, he wore a simple, well-worn pair of dark jeans, a plain grey Henley shirt that had seen better days, and a faded black zip-up hoodie. He moved with a gentle, deliberate grace that seemed out of place amidst the sharp, assertive strides of the other passengers. But it was his luggage that truly sealed his fate as an object of quiet derision. It was a single four-wheeled carry-on, a prototype from nearly a decade ago. The polycarbonate shell, once a sleek charcoal grey, was now a road map of his journeys, scuffed and scratched from countless baggage carousels and overhead bins from Lagos to Tokyo. The telescopic handle had a slight wobble, a known defect he'd personally insisted on correcting in the second-generation models. It was unassuming, functional, and to the untrained eye, utterly unremarkable. It looked cheap. Samuel knew this. He had designed it to be the opposite of cheap, to be durable, reliable, a steadfast companion. But he also knew that in a world that equated value with veneer, durability was an invisible virtue. He deliberately chose to travel with this old friend. It kept him grounded, a tangible reminder of his company's humble beginnings before it became a titan of the industry. He found a vacant leather armchair in a corner away from the main thoroughfare and settled in. He didn't want the champagne or the artisanal canapes. He just wanted a few moments of peace before his 14-hour flight to Singapore. He pulled a well-thumbed paperback from his hoodie pocket and began to read, effectively erecting a polite, invisible wall around himself. The wall, however, was not enough to keep out the noise. Not the ambient, acceptable noise of the lounge, but the specific, grating frequency of arrogance. "Honestly, can you believe it?" A woman's voice, sharp and brittle as shattered glass sliced through the calm. "They'll let just about anyone in here these days. It's supposed to be exclusive." Samuel didn't look up, but his focus on the page wavered. He knew, with the weary certainty of long experience, that the comment was a dart and he was the intended target. The The voice belonged to Jessica Thompson. She was seated with her husband, Kyle, and another couple sipping mimosas as if they were a life-sustaining elixir. Jessica was the kind of woman who wore her wealth like armor. Her blonde hair was a marvel of expensive engineering, her nails were immaculate, and her outfit a cream-colored cashmere travel set probably cost more than the average person's monthly mortgage payment. Kyle Thompson, a man whose face seemed permanently locked in a smug half-smirk, gestured vaguely with his glass in Samuel's direction. "Relax, Jess. Maybe he won the ticket in a raffle. Just try not to make eye contact. Poverty might be contagious." Their friends, another perfectly coiffed and curated couple, chuckled in unison. The sound was dry, devoid of genuine humor. "It's not that, Kyle. It's the aesthetic." Jessica pressed on her voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still perfectly audible from 10 feet away. "Look at that suitcase. I mean, honestly, it looks like something he pulled out of a dumpster. The scratches, the dents. It's just sad." "It's a health and safety hazard is what it is," the other man, Mark, chimed in. "A wheel will probably fall off and trip a flight attendant. They should have standards. Your luggage says something about you." Samuel felt a strange, detached sense of amusement bubble up inside him. He turned a page in his book, his movements slow and measured. "Your luggage says something about you." He couldn't agree more. There's a matching set of gleaming silver Rimowa trunks that looked like they had been hand-polished by angels, screamed of new money and a desperate need for validation. His he mused spoke of resilience, of journeys, taken of purpose. His bag had a story. Theirs had a price tag. "I'm just saying," Jessica continued, now emboldened by her audience, "if you're going to fly first, you should at least try to look the part. It's about respect for the rest of us who actually pay for the experience." Samuel had in fact paid for his ticket. He could have bought the entire plane, the entire fleet, if he'd felt so inclined. The irony was a rich, dark chocolate he could almost taste. He was the founder, CEO, and sole owner of Legacy Luggage, the very company that had, in the last 5 years, completely revolutionized the travel industry. Legacy had done to luxury luggage what Tesla had done to the automotive world. They had made it smart, durable, and stylish, leapfrogging the old, staid European brands like Rimowa and Tumi. Legacy was the darling of Silicon Valley billionaires, of Hollywood A-listers, of anyone who valued substance and innovation over antiquated notions of luxury. His company was valued at an estimated $6.8 billion. The battered suitcase they were mocking was in its own way a holy relic, the Legacy Zero, the prototype he had built with his own hands in his garage. It was the physical manifestation of a dream that everyone had told him was impossible. He remained silent, hidden behind the pages of his book. This was not a new experience for him. He had faced this kind of casual, dismissive prejudice his entire life. As a young black man growing up in Houston, he was told his ambitions were too high. As a scholarship student at Stanford, he was treated as a diversity statistic. And as an entrepreneur seeking venture capital, he was told time and again that people like him didn't build global luxury brands. He had proven them all wrong, not by shouting, but by building. His success was his rebuttal. He could have, at that moment, cleared his throat and introduced himself. He could have pulled out his black metal Legacy Centurion card, a privilege afforded to only a handful of people, and watched the blood drain from their faces. The thought was tempting a little flicker of vengeful fire. But what would it achieve? A moment of flustered embarrassment for them, a fleeting sense of vindication for him. It was a petty victory, and Samuel Adebayo did not deal in petty things. He preferred to play the long game. Instead, he listened. He learned. This was market research in its rawest, most unfiltered form. These people, these vain, insecure, status-obsessed individuals, were the very customers the old guard brand A catered to. They bought logos, not quality. They purchased status, not substance. Understanding their mindset, their weakness, was what had allowed him to conquer their market. They were so busy looking at the shiny exterior that they never bothered to check what was inside. "God, I hope he's not sitting near us," Jessica muttered, pulling out her phone. "I should post this to my story, a little travel faux pas 101. She angled her phone, trying to be subtle, but failing miserably, and snapped a picture of his suitcase, a disembodied, contextless shot of the scuffed grey shell. Caption: "If your luggage looks like this, please, for the love of all that is holy, just stay home." Samuel's jaw tightened just for a second. The detached observer in him momentarily receded, replaced by a surge of raw anger. Mocking him was one thing. He was a ghost to them, a non-entity. But mocking his work, the very symbol of his struggle and triumph, felt different. It felt personal. That bag had been with him when he'd slept in his car, when he'd flown economy to meet with manufacturers in Guangzhou, when he'd signed the first major distribution deal that had changed everything. It was an extension of himself, and she had just broadcast her contempt for it to the world. He took a slow, deep breath, letting the anger wash over him, and then recede. He reminded himself of his grandmother's favorite proverb: "A man who is stung by a bee does not go to war with the entire hive." He would not be drawn into their petty drama. He would not give them the satisfaction of a reaction. He simply closed his book, placing it on the small table beside him. The title was now visible: Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. He stood up his tall frame, unfolding from the chair, and gave the wobbly handle of his suitcase a familiar, affectionate pull. It slid up with a soft click. As he walked towards the boarding announcement, he passed their table. He didn't look at them, but he could feel their eyes on him, their judgment following him like a physical weight. He allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. They thought they were the main characters in this little airport drama. They had no idea they were merely extras in his, and the final act, he knew, was going to be unforgettable. The call for first-class boarding was a symphony of soft, exclusive chimes. For the Thompsons and their friends, it was a starting pistol. They were on their feet in an instant, all practiced nonchalance and muted urgency, eager to be the first to transition from one bubble of privilege to the next. Samuel, however, held back, allowing the small cluster of elite passengers to filter ahead. He preferred to board last, to minimize the time spent in the performative circus of pre-flight pleasantries. As he finally approached the gate agent, a young woman with a warm, genuine smile, he handed over his passport and boarding pass. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Adebayo," she said, her eyes meeting his with professional courtesy. "I hope you have a pleasant flight to Singapore." The simple, respectful address was a stark contrast to the venom he'd just endured. "Thank you. I'm sure I will," he replied, the words feeling more sincere than he'd intended. Behind him, he heard Jessica Thompson let out an exaggerated theatrical sigh. "Honestly, they're holding up the whole line," she muttered to her husband, loud enough for Samuel and the gate agent to hear. The agent's smile tightened, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before being professionally suppressed. Samuel stepped aside and began the walk down the jet bridge. The tunnel with its antiseptic lighting and window cutouts, offering glimpses of the powerful Rolls-Royce engine on the wing, always felt like a liminal space to him, a corridor between worlds. Today it felt like he was walking into the lion's den. He found his seat 2A, a spacious suite with its own sliding door for privacy, a lie-flat bed and a personal minibar. He slid his worn Legacy Zero suitcase into the designated overhead compartment, the scuffed shell looking almost defiant next to a pristine white leather Gucci carry-all. He settled into the plush leather seat and was about to close the door when the Thompsons arrived. As fate or a malicious booking algorithm would have it, they were his immediate neighbors across the aisle in seats 2D and 2G. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," Jessica whispered, her voice a venomous hiss. She stopped dead in the aisle, causing a minor traffic jam of other first-class passengers behind her. Kyle placed a hand on her arm. "Come on, just get in," he murmured, his face a mask of strained politeness. He shot a glance at Samuel, a look that was a potent cocktail of disdain and irritation. As Kyle maneuvered his own gleaming Rimowa trunk into the compartment above his seat, he seemed to lose his grip for a moment. The heavy silver case swung down its sharp aluminum corner, crashing directly into Samuel's Legacy Zero, with a sickening thud and a loud crack. It wasn't an accident. It was an act of petty aggression disguised as clumsiness, a physical manifestation of his contempt. "Oh, terribly sorry about that," Kyle said, his tone utterly devoid of sincerity. He glanced at Samuel's bag. "Looks like I might have added another scratch to the collection. But then what's one more, right?" Samuel looked from his suitcase, which now had a fresh, deep gouge in its side, to Kyle's smirking face. The air crackled with unspoken hostility. For a full 3 seconds, Samuel considered responding. He considered standing up, looking this man dead in the eye, and quietly dismantling his entire world. The words were on the tip of his tongue. But then he remembered the bee and the hive. A public confrontation would make him part of the spectacle. He would descend to their level, and their level was a place of mud and bile. Instead, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. "No harm done," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "My luggage is built to withstand impact. It's a feature, not a flaw." The response, so devoid of the anger Kyle had clearly been hoping to provoke, seemed to momentarily wrong-foot him. He grunted and turned his attention back to his seat. A senior flight attendant, a severe-looking woman named Chloe, with an air of practiced, almost militant authority, bustled over. Her eyes immediately took in the scene, the impeccably dressed Thompsons, the anomalously casual Samuel. Her internal calculus was swift and decisive. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her gaze directed primarily at Samuel, as if he were the source of the disturbance. "No, not at all," Jessica chimed in, her voice now dripping with saccharine sweetness. "My husband just had a little slip. This gentleman was just telling us how sturdy his luggage is." She said the word gentleman with an ironic lilt that was pure acid. Chloe's eyes flickered to Samuel's suitcase, and her lips thinned in disapproval. "Of course. Now if we could all please take our seats so we can prepare for takeoff." She then turned her full beaming attention to the Thompsons. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, can I get you started with a glass of Dom Perignon? Or perhaps a warm towel?" "That would be lovely, Chloe." "Thank you," Jessica purred. Chloe then glanced at Samuel, her professional smile dimming by several watts. "And for you, sir?" she asked, her tone clipped and perfunctory. "Just some water, please." "No ice," Samuel replied quietly. He could feel their collective judgment solidifying, cementing him as the outsider, the interloper. He was the charity case they had to tolerate. He closed the suite door, the soft click shutting out the aisle, but not the feeling of being watched, of being weighed and found wanting. From across the aisle he could hear Jessica talking to Kyle in an excited, hushed tone. "My post is getting so much engagement. My friend Chloe, you know, the one who runs that Lux Life blog, she just commented, 'So true, some people have no class.' This is exactly the kind of content my followers love. It's authentic. It's about maintaining standards." Samuel leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. Authentic. She was using a photo of his life's work as a prop to build a personal brand based on manufactured superiority, and calling it authentic. The audacity was almost breathtaking. This wasn't just casual snobbery anymore. It was a calculated act of digital aggression. She wasn't just mocking a stranger. She was leveraging that mockery for personal gain, turning her prejudice into a commodity. A younger flight attendant, a man in his early 20s with kind eyes, later came by to deliver his water. "Here you are, Dr. Adebayo," he said softly, noticing the closed door and speaking in a respectful murmur. "My name is Ken. If you need anything at all during the flight, please don't hesitate to let me know." "Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that," Samuel said, opening his eyes and giving the young man a warm smile. Ken nodded and retreated his simple act of professional kindness, a balm on the small wounds inflicted by the others. For the next few hours, Samuel drifted in and out of a light sleep, the low hum of the engines a familiar lullaby. But his mind was working. He wasn't angry anymore. The raw emotion had cooled and sharpened into something else, a plan. He had been on his way to Singapore for the annual Global Innovators Summit, a gathering of the world's most influential minds in tech, finance, and design. He was scheduled to deliver the closing keynote address, a speech he'd been planning to center on the future of sustainable manufacturing. Now, however, he felt a new theme emerging. He pulled out his tablet, the screen's glow soft in the darkened cabin. He opened the file containing his speech and created a new document. He began to type, his fingers flying across the virtual keyboard. He would no longer talk just about sustainability. He would talk about value. He would talk about perception, about status, and about the deep, often unseen legacy of hard work that underpins all true innovation. He would tell a story, his story, and he would start it with a battered charcoal grey suitcase. He looked over at the overhead bin. The fresh gouge from Kyle's Rimowa was like a battle scar. It wasn't ugly. It was proof. Proof that it could take a hit from a hollow, flashy competitor and remain standing, its core integrity unshaken. Across the aisle, blissfully unaware, Jessica Thompson was scrolling through the comments on her post, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone, basking in the cheap warmth of online validation. She was a travel blogger, soaring at 38,000 feet, convinced she was on her way to the top. She had no idea that in the suite just a few feet away, the man she had targeted for ridicule was recalibrating the trajectory of her entire world. The flight was long and he had plenty of time to work. The descent, he mused, was going to be brutal. The Global Innovators Summit was held in the largest ballroom at the Marina Bay Sands, a cavernous space that managed to feel both immense and intimate. The air itself felt supercharged, thick with the ambition of 1,000 of the world's brightest and wealthiest minds. Tech titans from Palo Alto mingled with venture capitalists from London and design gurus from Stockholm. It was the ultimate confluence of power, intellect, and capital. And for Jessica and Kyle Thompson, it was paradise. They had spent the last 2 days in a whirlwind of networking, their confidence buoyed by the rarefied air. Kyle had managed to secure a brief, promising conversation with a senior partner at a major Singaporean sovereign wealth fund. Jessica, meanwhile, was playing her part to perfection. She moved through the crowds with a practiced grace, her Instagram story, a curated highlight reel of clinking champagne flutes, insightful-sounding quotes from panel discussions, and selfies with minor tech celebrities. Her post mocking Samuel's suitcase had become a minor touchstone for her, a story she recounted with embellishment to her friends. And then the man says, she'd narrated over lunch at Spargo, overlooking the stunning Singapore skyline. It's built to withstand impact, as if this dented trash can was some kind of high-tech marvel. The delusion was just staggering. Her friends had laughed, shaking their heads in shared disbelief. They were all members of the same tribe, secure in their conviction that they were the arbiters of taste and value. The man from the plane had become a caricature in their minds, a cautionary tale of someone who simply didn't belong. Now, on the final afternoon, they settled into their prime seats for the closing keynote address. This was the main event, the moment the entire summit had been building towards. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the 1,000-strong audience. The summit's organizer, a charismatic tech investor named Julian Vance, walked to the center of the vast stage. A massive screen behind him showed an abstract, swirling digital animation. "Good afternoon, innovators," Julian began, his voice echoing through the state-of-the-art sound system. "For 3 days we have talked about the future. We've discussed AI biotech, the metaverse, and the new frontiers of human achievement. But for our closing keynote, we wanted to focus on something more fundamental. We wanted to talk about legacy." A ripple of intrigue went through the crowd. Our speaker today is a man who embodies that word. Julian continued, his tone becoming more reverent. He is one of the most disruptive and yet one of the most famously private entrepreneurs of our generation. 10 years ago, the luxury goods market was stagnant, dominated by a handful of European heritage brands who believed their name alone was enough. They were selling history. Our speaker decided to sell the future. Kyle leaned over to Jessica. "Must be talking about the guy from Kronos," he whispered, referencing a new ultra-exclusive smartwatch brand. "I hear he's a complete recluse. He started in his garage with a single idea." Julian's voice boomed, "to create a product that was not only beautiful and innovative, but virtually indestructible. A product built on integrity, not just image. He took on giants who had centuries of history, and in less than a decade, he beat them. He didn't just build a company. He built a movement. Today, his brand is the undisputed global leader in high-performance travel goods, a multi-billion-dollar empire built from scratch." Jessica felt a small, unfamiliar flicker of unease. High-performance travel goods. The phrase snagged in her mind. "He rarely makes public appearances," Julian said, "but he is here today to share his story, his vision for what it means to build a lasting legacy in a disposable world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and CEO of Legacy Luggage, Dr. Samuel Adebayo." For a moment, there was silence. The name was known, of course, it was legendary. But the man himself was a mystery, a faceless enigma. Then from the wings of the stage a figure emerged. He was tall and wore a custom-tailored navy suit that fit him like a second skin. He moved with the same deliberate, unhurried grace from the airport, but here on this stage it was transformed. It was not the movement of a man out of place, but of a man who owned any space he occupied. He exuded a quiet, magnetic confidence that instantly commanded the attention of every person in the room. It was the man from the plane. The reaction at the Thompsons' table was not instantaneous. It was a slow, sickening, multi-stage dawning of reality. First came confusion. Jessica's brow furrowed. It couldn't be. It was just a resemblance, a trick of the light. But then the massive screen behind the stage switched from the abstract animation to a live feed of the speaker. And there he was. His face projected 20 feet high, the same calm, intelligent eyes, the same weary lines that now looked like marks of profound wisdom. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. The artisanal water she'd been sipping suddenly tasted like ash. She felt the blood drain from her face, a cold, prickling sensation that spread down her neck and into her chest. She instinctively grabbed Kyle's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his forearm. Kyle was frozen, his mouth slightly agape, his smug smirk having evaporated, replaced by a mask of slack-jawed horror. He saw the man on stage, and his mind replayed the scene in the airplane aisle in vivid, excruciating detail. His own sneering voice, the arrogant swing of his suitcase, the crack of his expensive Rimowa against the cheap luggage. The cheap luggage that was, he now understood, the foundational artifact of a multi-billion-dollar empire. Their friend Mark, who had called the bag a health and safety hazard, looked like he had seen a ghost. His wife, Sarah, simply covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with disbelief. The room erupted in thunderous applause, but the four of them couldn't hear it. They were trapped in the silent bubble of their own catastrophic misjudgment. Samuel walked to the podium and placed his hands on its sides. He looked out at the sea of faces, his gaze sweeping across the room, before seeming to settle just for a moment in the direction of their table. "Thank you, Julian," Samuel began. His voice, calm and resonant, amplified to fill every corner of the vast hall. Legacy. It's a powerful word. We think of it as something we leave behind. But I believe a legacy is something we build and carry with us every single day. He paused, then gestured to a corner of the stage. An assistant wheeled out a single object and placed it under the spotlight. It was his suitcase, the charcoal grey, decade-old prototype from the airport lounge, scratched, battered, and bearing a fresh, deep gouge on its side. On the 20-foot screen behind him, every single imperfection was magnified for the 1,000 most influential people in the world to see. "This is Legacy Zero," Samuel said, his voice imbued with a quiet affection. "This was my first, my partner. It's not pretty. It's covered in the scars of 1,000 journeys. It has been thrown, dropped, kicked, and insulted." At the word insulted, Jessica felt a physical jolt as if he had struck her. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. Her phone, lying on the table in front of her, suddenly felt like a live grenade. The post, the picture, the caption. Oh, God. "Recently on my flight here to Singapore," Samuel continued, his tone conversational, "this bag was subjected to a bit of turbulence in the aisle." He looked down at the gouge, a wry smile playing on his lips. "It was hit quite hard, actually, by a much newer, much shinier, much more expensive suitcase. And my old friend here just took the hit, because this bag was never about the shine. It was about the core. It was built with integrity from the inside out." The audience was captivated, leaning in. They thought it was a metaphor, a brilliant rhetorical device. But the Thompsons knew it was the literal truth. He was telling the story. Their story. And he was casting them as the villains without ever mentioning their names. The world we live in is obsessed with the shell." Samuel declared, his voice rising with passion. "We are told to judge a book by its cover, a person by their watch, an idea by its packaging. We mistake price for value and logos for legitimacy. But I am here to tell you that true legacy, true innovation is not in the gleaming, untouched surface. It's in the scars. It's in the resilience. It's in the ability to get hit, to get knocked down, and to still protect what's essential inside." He tapped the old suitcase. "This is my legacy. Not because it's worth billions, but because it's a promise. A promise that what's inside is more important than how it looks on the outside." The applause that followed was deafening, a sustained, rolling wave of appreciation and respect. Samuel stood there, a solitary, powerful figure, bathed in the spotlight. Jessica, however, felt only ice in her veins. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking so violently she could barely unlock it. She had to delete the post. She had to erase the evidence. But she knew with a sickening, gut-wrenching certainty that it was already too late. In the digital world, nothing ever truly disappears, and she had just publicly, viciously, and arrogantly insulted the very man the entire world was now giving a standing ovation. She hadn't just made a faux pas. She had committed career suicide. The standing ovation for Samuel Adebayo felt like it would never end. For Jessica and Kyle Thompson, it was an eternity spent in a personal hell. They remained glued to their seats, paralyzed by a mixture of shame, terror, and a profound, soul-crushing humiliation. Every clap from the 1,000-strong audience felt like a hammer blow against the fragile edifice of their lives. Jessica's shaking hands finally managed to navigate to her Instagram profile. There it was, the picture of the scuffed grey suitcase, still sitting proudly in her story highlights under the title "Travel Fails." The caption, "If your luggage looks like this, please, for the love of all that is holy, just stay home." Now read like a suicide note. She stabbed at the screen to delete it, but she knew it was a futile gesture. The digital ghost was already out of the machine. The moment Samuel's speech concluded, the ballroom transformed. The ambient murmur of polite networking was replaced by a frantic, buzzing energy. Phones were out, not for selfies, but for furious typing. The story was just too good, too deliciously ironic. The reclusive genius and the airport snobs. It was a modern-day fable, and everyone wanted to be the first to tell it. Before Kyle and Jessica could even summon the strength to stand a man at their table. A tech journalist from Wired, who had been friendly just that morning, looked from his phone to Jessica, his expression one of dawning predatory glee. "Wait a minute. Chloe from Lux Life commented on your post," he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "She was at the keynote. She knows." The blood drained from Jessica's face. Chloe, her supposed friend, her competitor, the queen bee of the luxury blogging world. She had handed her biggest rival a weapon of mass destruction. They tried to flee. They gathered their things with clumsy, panicked movements and attempted to slip out of the ballroom, but it was like trying to outrun a shockwave. Their faces, contorted with stress, were suddenly recognizable to people who hadn't given them a second glance an hour ago. Whispers followed them, turning heads, pointing fingers. They weren't just anonymous attendees anymore. They were them, the ones from the story. By the time they reached the sanctuary of their hotel suite, the digital avalanche had already begun. It started with Chloe. Her blog, Lux Life, posted an article titled "The Ultimate Travel Faux Pas: How One Blogger's Arrogance Led to the Social Media Fail of the Year." It was a masterclass in swift, brutal execution. Chloe didn't even need to be overtly malicious. She simply laid out the facts: Jessica Thompson's now-deleted Instagram post, the public mocking, and the stunning revelation that the target of her scorn was the beloved, press-shy founder of Legacy Luggage himself, Samuel Adebayo. She included screenshots. The internet, after all, never forgets. The story was picked up by Mashable, then Forbes, then the Daily Mail. It went from a tech world anecdote to a global news story in under 3 hours. Luxfail and That Legacy Lesson were trending on Twitter. Jessica's Instagram, which she had so carefully cultivated into a temple of aspirational perfection, became a digital pillory. Her follower count, once her proudest metric, began to hemorrhage, dropping by tens of thousands every hour. But for every follower she lost, she gained 100 comments. They were a tidal wave of vitriol, disgust, and mockery. Imagine being so insecure you have to bully a man for his suitcase, and it's that man, LOL. This is what happens when your personality is based on brand names instead of character. Hey, at Rimowa, is this who you want representing your brand? A petty bully I'm switching to at Legacy Luggage today. The last comment was a sign of the real-world consequences to come. The brands she had so carefully courted, the ones who paid her thousands for a single sponsored post, began to sever ties with surgical precision. The first email was from a Swiss watchmaker. In light of recent events, we have decided to terminate our partnership agreement, effective immediately. Then came the French cosmetic company, the Italian fashion house, the boutique hotel chain. Her career, which was built on the perception of impeccable taste and aspirational status, was being dismantled email by email. For Kyle, the fallout was less public, but infinitely more devastating. The promising conversation he'd had with the senior partner at the Singaporean sovereign wealth fund, Temasek Holdings, had turned into a scheduled meeting for the following morning. It was the kind of meeting Kyle had dreamed of, a potential multi-million-dollar investment deal for his boutique private equity firm. He had planned to go in, project an aura of calm competence, and secure the funding that would elevate him to the next level. He never got the chance. At 11 p.m. the night of the speech, he received a curt one-sentence email from the partner's assistant. "We are cancelling tomorrow's meeting. Our firm's investment philosophy is not aligned with your demonstrated personal conduct." The message was clear. It wasn't about his firm's performance or his financial models. It was about his character. In the high-stakes world of international finance, where trust and reputation are the most valuable currencies, he had proven himself bankrupt. Who would entrust millions of dollars to a man who showed such poor judgment, such casual cruelty? Who would partner with a man who would so arrogantly damage the property of a stranger? The story of the aisle turbulence had been part of Samuel's speech. And while Samuel hadn't named Kyle, everyone in that room knew precisely who he was talking about. The man with the shiny new Rimowa. The man who was now a pariah. Kyle slumped onto the edge of the king-sized bed, in their suite, the cityscape of Singapore, glittering mockingly outside the window. He looked at Jessica, who was sitting on the floor, staring blankly at her phone, watching her life's work burn to the ground in real time. The expensive cashmere travel set she had worn with such pride now looked like a costume for a part she could no longer play. "This is your fault." He seethed, the words escaping his lips before he could stop them. "Your stupid, petty obsession with status. Your phone. Your blog." Jessica looked up, her eyes blazing with a desperate, cornered fury. "My fault. My fault. You were right there with me laughing. You were the one who said poverty might be contagious. You were the one who smashed your suitcase into his, to defend your honor because you were so offended by the sight of an old bag," he shot back. The argument that followed was ugly bitter, and filled with the poison of two people who had built their relationship on a foundation as hollow as their values. They weren't a team. They were just two narcissists who had been swimming in the same direction. Now that the tide had turned, they were tearing each other apart. As they fought, a notification popped up on Kyle's laptop. It was a market alert. LVMH parent company of Rimowa stock down 1.8% in after-hours trading. Legacy Luggage, LGCY stock up 7.3% on news of CEO's viral speech. The irony was almost too much to bear. In their attempt to police the boundaries of the luxury world, they had inadvertently handed their chosen brand a financial loss and delivered a multi-million-dollar victory to the man they despised. They had mocked a man for his cheap luggage, only to discover he was the billionaire behind the brand. But the karma was more intricate, more cruel than that. They hadn't just been revealed as fools. Their own actions, their own words, their own prejudices had become the very instruments of their ruin. They had built the pyre, and Samuel Adebayo had simply quietly handed them the match. The flight back to New York was a 14-hour funeral procession. There was no first-class lounge this time. Their tickets had been unceremoniously downgraded by the airline, a courtesy extended to Samuel Adebayo by a CEO who was a personal friend and a massive admirer. They were seated in premium economy, a public shaming that felt more acute than any financial loss. They were surrounded by the very people they had long considered beneath them, their faces hidden behind masks and hoodies, hoping not to be recognized. The flight attendant who served them was Ken, the kind-eyed young man from their flight out. He treated them with a cool, professional politeness that was somehow more damning than any overt hostility would have been. The world they returned to was not the one they had left. Their social circle, a constellation of fair-weather friends and status-conscious acquaintances, had vanished. Invitations were rescinded. Calls went unanswered. They were radioactive, their names synonymous with a spectacular and deeply satisfying public downfall. For Jessica, the dream was over. Her blog was a wasteland of hate comments. Her brand was toxic. She was forced to take her entire online presence private, effectively erasing herself from the world she had tried so desperately to conquer. She was a ghost, haunting the ruins of her former life. For Kyle, the consequences were far more concrete. The story of his demonstrated personal conduct spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community of Wall Street. His firm's existing investors grew nervous. A key client, a wealthy family office he had cultivated for years, pulled their funds. The reason they gave was reputational risk. It was a death sentence. Within 2 months, his boutique firm, Thompson Capital, was insolvent. He had lost everything, not just the potential deal in Singapore, but the entire foundation of his wealth and identity. The man who had sneered at another for potential poverty was now facing it himself. Their friends Mark and Sarah, who had chuckled along in the airport lounge, were not spared. Mark was a senior vice president at a major advertising agency whose biggest client was, by a cruel twist of fate, the airline on which they had all been flying. The airline's CMO, having been made aware of the incident, and Mark's participation by the CEO himself, terminated their multi-million-dollar contract, citing a fundamental misalignment of values. Mark was fired a week later. The karma was not a lightning strike. It was a slow, creeping rot that decayed everything they had built. It was precise, targeted, and devastatingly effective. One rainy afternoon, about 6 months after the summit, Samuel Adebayo was in his office in New York, a minimalist space overlooking the Hudson River. His desk was clear, save for his laptop and a single object, the Legacy Zero prototype. It sat on a custom-made stand, a piece of art, a corporate touchstone. His assistant buzzed him. "Dr. Adebayo, a Chloe Miller is on line 1. She says it's a personal matter. She used to be a senior flight attendant with Global Airways." Samuel paused. Chloe, the severe-looking flight attendant who had dismissed him so curtly. "Put her through," he said, his curiosity piqued. The voice on the other end was humbled, stripped of its former authority. "Dr. Adebayo, I don't know if you remember me." "I remember you, Chloe," he said softly. She took a shaky breath. "I was fired after that flight. They said I failed to uphold the company's standards of customer service for all passengers regardless of appearance. They showed me the video of my interaction with you and the Thompsons. I was so ashamed. I saw what they saw. I judged you. I am so sorry." Samuel listened patiently. He could have gloated. He could have told her she got what she deserved. But that was not his way. "Chloe," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I appreciate your call. But I did not ask for you to be fired. Your employer made a decision based on their own principles. The lesson here isn't for me. It's for you. What you do with it is what matters now." He wished her well and ended the call, a quiet melancholy settling over him. He had not sought this carnage. He had simply held up a mirror, and the world had reacted to the ugly reflections it saw. A few weeks later, a package arrived at the Legacy headquarters, addressed personally to him. There was no return address. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was a single, gleaming silver Rimowa trunk. It was Kyle Thompson's. Taped to the top was a handwritten letter. "Dr. Adebayo. There is nothing I can say that can undo what I did. Sorry is a pathetic and meaningless word for the arrogance and disrespect I showed you. I have lost my business. I have lost my wife. Jessica left me last month. I have lost the respect of everyone I know. I have learned in the most brutal way imaginable what you meant by value and integrity. I am selling everything I own to try and start over. But I couldn't bring myself to sell this. It feels tainted. It's a symbol of the man I was, a man I hope I never am again. I don't expect you to want it. Perhaps you can donate it to a lab for stress testing. I know from experience that it's not as durable as your product. I have a long way to go, but my journey has to start somewhere. Thank you for the lesson. It cost me everything, but I suspect it was worth it. Sincerely, Kyle Thompson." Samuel read the letter twice. He looked at the gleaming silver trunk, then back at his own battered, scarred Legacy Zero. He didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel vindication. He felt a profound sense of soreness for the waste of it all. He picked up his phone and called his head of human resources. "Helen," he said, "I want to set up a new foundation, a grant program. We'll call it the Second Chance Initiative. It will be for entrepreneurs from non-traditional backgrounds who have faced failure, who have made mistakes, but who have a viable idea and a demonstrated willingness to learn from their past. Find a way to anonymously send an application to a man named Kyle Thompson. Don't tell him it came from us. Just give him a path. Whether he walks it or not is up to him." He hung up the phone and looked out the window at the city below. He had not set out to destroy anyone. He had simply defended his legacy. But in the end, he realized a true legacy wasn't just about building something indestructible. It was about having the strength and the grace to help others rebuild. The Thompsons and their friends had been stung by karma, a consequence of their own actions. But Samuel Adebayo, the man they had scorned, chose not to be the bee that stings, but the man who plants the flowers, giving even the most undeserving a chance to find pollen once more. And there you have it, a moment of judgment in an airport lounge, a single post on social media, and a quiet man who understood that the greatest power isn't in shouting your worth, but in building it. The Thompsons' world fell apart, not because Samuel Adebayo was vengeful, but because the world he built was founded on a truth they couldn't see, that character is the ultimate luxury brand. Their story is a powerful reminder that the person you dismiss today might be the one who defines your world tomorrow. What did you think of this story of hard karma? Does it make you think twice about how we judge others based on appearances? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories about justice, inspiration, and the surprising twists of life, make sure you hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Thank you for watching.